Donald Trump thinks abuse of power is a good thing, that it's a governing principle. But we've seen Project 2025, and we know the lawsuits that need to be filed, hundreds of them, in the first 100 days of the Trump administration in its return against his misuse of power, particularly using the military and federal agencies and federal statutes against the American people in terms of invalid, unconstitutional surveillance, the suppression of people's First Amendment rights, his attacks on the media and the like. And our ways to do it is hiding in plain sight. It is the Constitution, particularly the First Amendment, freedom of speech, the Fifth Amendment, due process rights, the Fourth Amendment against illegal searches and seizures that will be used in federal courts, filed in friendly courts, up to friendly circuits, that will be used to restrain Donald Trump. I want to focus on surveillance, suppression of the First Amendment rights, and the lawsuits that are being prepared to attack it right now. Now, let me give people some comfort. I know there is a lack of confidence in the justice system, seeing how they handled the criminal aspects of Donald Trump's conduct and behavior and those around him up to the United States Supreme Court, mainly at the Supreme Court level. However, now we're talking about the successful use of federal courts by organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, like Court Accountability Action, and other groups, other public interest groups that have been successful in the past. For instance, the ACLU has filed successfully over 400 lawsuits against the first Trump administration, and they're prepared to do it again. Donald Trump has already said in Project 2025 that he plans on using the U.S. military on domestic soil to implement his policies. He'll use Homeland Security, the FBI, the Department of Justice, ICE, and the National Guard to implement suppression, to take away your First Amendment right to protest lawfully and to assemble. And there's ways around that. When he abuses power, every time he abuses power, there will be a lawsuit that is filed arguing under various constitutional provisions that I've outlined here. The First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. If he tries to take away people's rights and throw them into jails without due process, the Fifth Amendment and due process guarantees there. Federal court's abilities through a provision we call a writ of habeas corpus to get somebody out of jail and before a federal judge. They will be used by these organizations. The Fourth Amendment against illegal searches and seizures will be used. And when Donald Trump tries to use the federal military or nationalize the National Guard to put down protest against his policies, he will have violated likely the Posse Comitatus Act, the PCA, from 1878, which says coming out of our Civil War and our Reconstruction period, that the federal military should not be used to impose policy on domestic soil against its citizens. If he violates the PCA, we run into court immediately with a lawsuit. It's been done before, as I said, by groups like the ACLU and other public interest groups. And we will do it again and we're not going to file it in Texas. We're not going to file the lawsuits in Mississippi or Louisiana. We're going to file it, let's be frank, in blue states, in New York, in Rhode Island, in Connecticut, in the District of Columbia. And we'll get fair-minded federal judges appointed by Clinton and Obama and Biden, up to circuit courts that were appointed by Clinton and Obama and Biden on the appellate level. And then we'll have our fight left at the Supreme Court, focused on the center and center right, like Amy Coney Barrett, to get them over with the other three, along with Chief Justice Roberts on occasion, to ensure that the worst instincts of the Trump administration do not come to fruition. Now, look, the Supreme Court, frankly, knows, and Chief Justice Roberts particularly knows, he opened a Pandora's box by immunizing Donald Trump and his worst instincts and telling him he'll never be prosecuted for anything he does. But now they're going to have to deal with it on a policy basis, a civil policy basis, where Donald Trump tries to weaponize all the agencies and all the regulators that he has under him to go after Americans. Now, Donald Trump will use, and we are prepared with lawsuits, he will try to use FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, Section 702, to what I think in the abuse of power will be the illegal wiretapping and surveillance of Americans for no good reason other than they're considered the enemies of Donald Trump. When he retaliates against his enemies, This is not my words. These are his words on the campaign trail. These are within Project 2025. These are the people that he's going to put in charge of the FBI and the CIA and the intelligence community, who said, we're going after the media. What does the media do? You use the First Amendment. You use the Fourth Amendment. You use the Fifth Amendment. You go into federal courts in friendly faces and you get law passed. You get rulings in your favor. And that is how you rein in an attempted abuse of power. We saw it during the last criminal presidency with Nixon, right? But here, we know what's going on in real time. Fortunately, Donald Trump gave us his playbook. It's like we're on a football field and the other side left their playbook in the bathroom and we found it. We know their playbook. It is Project 2025. The suits are being prepared right now. We know Donald Trump will try to use illegal surveillance, try to suppress First Amendment, go after the media. He will weaponize the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. He will go after what he perceives to be his enemies, like the Washington Post, CBS, where he already sued civilly in Texas, other news organizations, social media organizations, podcasts, independent journalism, whatever. Kash Patel, who is likely going to be ahead of one of the intelligence agencies, who has no experience whatsoever, he said on the campaign trail, we're going after the media. What they did the last time in 2016 is they used their powers of the FCC and weaponized it to try to make sure that MAGA content stayed platformed on these various social media platforms and were given, quote unquote, equal time on television networks. They'll do it again. They're going to put some MAGA Heritage Foundation, Leonard Leo, hand-selected pick for the FCC to go after licenses and the rest. And these organizations like CBS and ABC and all the other corporate media are going to have to run into court and argue against this abuse of power using these statutes, these constitutional provisions. The Supreme Court opened the door. The Pandora's box that they opened is that they are going to enable, they were major enablers for Donald Trump to try these policies as a part of his abuse of power strategy. We, in response, I almost said retaliation, in response, right, in resistance, need to file these suits, prosecute them with quality attorneys, which we have, get the right judges, get the right circuits, and get the right rulings. And do that over the course and tie up the Trump administration and its policies and get national bans against his policies and get stays by federal judges ordering blocks of his policy. Tie him up in knots the way the MAGA did to us and Joe Biden. Every time he tried to pass something about immigration, try to pass something about student loans, try to pass something to help the American people, MAGA was there with MAGA judges to block it. Same thing here. It goes the other way, by the way. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so I wanted to outline for you and give you some hope. As the ACLU has said recently, and I totally agree with it, resignation and abandonment is not a strategy. This is not the time to be faint of heart. This is the time to push forward in opposition, not in exile, and to use the powers of the courts. Sure, our confidence in the courts up to the Supreme Court have taken a major hit, and I understand it. But they have historically, including during the Trump administration, been there at the right moment, the right intersection of law and politics, and have made the right decisions time and time again. And we got to flood the zone with not just one or two cases, dozens and hundreds of cases on these particular points. I just did a hot take about how abortion and abortion rights and reproductive rights will be further undermined by Donald Trump on day one based on the playbook, Project 2025 and otherwise. And what lawsuits are already being prepared in counterweight, right? He might be Lex Luthor, but we're Superman when we are combined and in courts. So have confidence. The ACLU alone filed over 500 lawsuits alone. Add in the Planned Parenthood, add in other public interest groups, the Democratic National Committee, and other groups. There were thousands of lawsuits that were successful against the Trump administration to rein in his first abuse of power. We've been to this movie. We've seen this trailer. We know how it ends, and we are prepared. And that starts not yesterday. Started yesterday. Doesn't start tomorrow. It starts yesterday and today. And so I'm going to do a series of hot takes to talk about what laws are on the books now, what constitutional amendments we have as superpowers in our arsenal to use against Donald Trump's evil intent that he's going to try to pass by executive orders, that he can do without Congress at all, and then have to go to congressional bills and law and all of that. I mean, we'll do other hot takes about what can happen in Congress, depending upon who gets final control of the House, and what, as a minority party, even that we can do and the Democrats can do to gum up the work, so to speak, throw sand in the gears. But right now, I want to focus on the thing that I'm comfortable with, which is the court system. The other things that we know he's going to try to use at the end of this hot take is he's going to try to use the National Emergencies Act, the Immigration and Nationality Act, to try to impose bans. So here's where immigration, undignified, inhumane immigration policy, separating families, deporting people and sending them back without due process and without hearings, revoking their status given to them by the prior administration in an inhumane way. That's where it comes in with suppression and First Amendment rights. It's sort of at that intersection. And so we have to, every time he tries to abuse the law that's on the books, the National Emergencies Act, to impose bans, the Immigration and Nationality Act, to do the same thing, what do you need? You need a lawsuit to go challenge the overreach under that particular law. Every law that may be on the books misused by Donald Trump is an abuse of power that needs to be brought before a federal judge, ultimately a federal circuit, and then the United States Supreme Court. I know, and I've outlined the federal courts that need to be used. The ones in New York up to the Second Circuit, the ones in the District of Columbia area at the DC Circuit, the issues related to agencies that would go to the federal circuit, right? The Ninth Circuit in California, these are favorable. These are headed by Supreme Court justices like Sotomayor and Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson on the first stop of the appeal train. And that's what we need to use. We're going to continue to follow how we're going to use the Constitution and how we're going to rein in Donald Trump's abuse of power on day one. And it's our day one too. Project 2025 is his playbook. It's our playbook. We have the mirror image in terms of a defense strategy ready to go. It's already been drafted and filed. And in addition to that, we know that it was successful. We have just 8 years ago how successful these hundreds and hundreds, up to 1,000 lawsuits were to stop the abuse of power the first time, and we're ready to do it a second time. Follow everything about the intersection of law and politics on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. It's our podcast every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then just to, because we know about these thousands of lawsuits that are going to be filed and all the action at the United States Supreme Court and federal courts, we formed in advance of the election to be there, to be durable, to be on the other side of Tuesday, as we said. A new channel called Legal AF on the YouTube channel. I'm the chief curator there. I'm doing a lot of the content, but I'm bringing in content contributors and we'll continue to do that throughout the Meidas universe and beyond. We'll get people from the ACLU to come on and talk to us. We have court accountability action already there. Free subscribe, help us build that pro-democracy channel as well. So until my next hot take and contribution, I'm Michael Popok, and I am reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.